Welcome to the Awe and Wonder podcast. We're talking to more leaders and change makers. And today we're joined by Amy Campbell, who is a teacher, a special education teacher in Washington State in the Campbell School District. And if you're in Washington State, you may know her because, well, she's all over the place as far as leading the way in inclusionary practices for students. But she was the 2020 Teacher of the Year Award recipient, very deservingly. And also, Amy, I saw that you are featured in a video from OSPI on inclusion. And so that's pretty cool. So welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Brenda and Sarah. I'm a full-time teacher. I'm a special education teacher in the Camas School District, and I've been doing that for 17 years. I serve students who experience moderate to profound impact from disability, and the program I'm working in, we've relabeled and changed service definition, or the definitions, I guess, have stayed the same, but the names have changed in Camas as we're really trying to think critically about what the ways that we're serving students. So right now, I am the lead teacher in what we're calling integrated communication services. So all of my students are learning to use AAC, and the integration is throughout the entire day. So I have a variety of different speech generating devices or communication pathways that we utilize in my classroom all the time. And so mostly I'm a communication teacher, facilitator, collaborator at school. I do a lot of that.
What age group?
Oh, I teach third, fourth, and fifth grade students.
Okay.
So, and that is I hate to even say I have a favorite, but that is my favorite age group. I've been with this age group for a long time, and I think the continuity is really important because I've been working in the same school for a while. So the teachers who I'm collaborating with, we have a great relationship. There's a good team. So I know I have a lot of great supports already set up for students, and then we do build individualized programming for each one. Within what we already know is working, what is already evidence-based and in place in our school. So that's my day-to-day. And then I have a number of other sort of roles that I play out in the community. I am on the Professional Educator Standards Board, which is a governor's appointment, and we work on education standards for teachers in Washington State, which is really exciting. And my interest in that is obviously, as we're considering education standards, I bring a special education lens, an inclusionary practice lens. How do we be sure that all educators in Washington have the skills to be able to serve our students who we know have diverse learning needs? So that's something that I do. I am also a member of the Inclusionary Practice Technical Network in Washington State. And so I work as a cadre member for the Washington Education Association, and I get to do professional development for educators in Washington on inclusionary practices, which is my current passion. So a few different little connections of jobs that I do, and most of it's just aligned with ensuring access and inclusion for individuals with disabilities in the state of Washington.
That's awesome. And the Inclusionary Practices Technical Network is not a new concept, right? Because we've been talking about inclusionary practices in Washington, but it is a new term. And the Special Ed Tech Center is also part of that. It's a really neat, it's neat that they have this group of different, just from all over. There's some parent perspective and teachers and TA providers. So that's pretty exciting. Amy, what does inclusion look like in your school?
This is a great question. People ask about this a lot. And because I think as I'm advocating for inclusion, people are like, are you talking about full inclusion? And people are worried. And I think we are heading in a direction of making sure that there's full community school inclusive experiences for all of our students. And that is not what service looks like in my school. We do individualized programming. So most of my students are included 40, 50, sometimes more, 60% of the day, but it's highly individualized and determined by the team. So oftentimes they're participating, well, all of them are not. I have a classroom and we do direct instruction in my classroom, but it's also an open classroom so that, you know, all students within the school can come into my classroom and we can do social groups that include a variety of students where everyone's learning to use AAC or speech generating devices, and we're learning to play collaboratively and include. So like we do some instruction in my room for everyone. I also do specialized one-on-one or small group instruction in my classrooms that's aligned to IEP goals and objectives. But then students are out in the general school population for the rest of the time. So they're doing like their morning meetings, their SEL check-ins. I love that my classroom is empty for the first portion of the day as they're out doing those things. And then receiving modified instruction. For example, I had a student who's doing science right now with fourth grade, and she was out for a long time today, and they were building with popsicle sticks and had Play-Doh, and she came back just jazzed about the science that she was doing in that classroom. All the specialist times, we have students will participate along with their peers for PE and music and library, and it is really individualized. So they're receiving instruction in both settings, and it works really well because all the teachers at my school are used to serving a diverse set of student needs.
Right off the bat, when I think about including children with AAC in general ed classrooms, I'm sure you've had a variety of responses for general ed teachers around that. And what is the expectation of the general ed teacher in that? Are they supposed to be modeling the AAC? Are they addressing kids and providing enough wait time for children to respond? Or is that where your training comes in? Where are we at with the general education?
That well, we have a couple things, and I think first
Okay.
of all, it just starts with having AAC users have been in our school for a long time. And so there is an understanding, like, first of all, teachers have seen speech generating devices be effective communication for students with significant disabilities in the past. And that really has been important for developing that positive presupposition that all students have a message, and they just need to wait long enough and ensure that the student has the right opportunity to communicate. So they've like all our teachers have seen this can really work. A lot of the students in the classroom have had opportunities alongside me and my paraeducators and students who are AAC users to trial AAC, to demystify it. So if you're at a game group and it's their turn to tell somebody your turn or the green or go or help, then they know how long it takes. And so then you have students becoming advocates in the classrooms, and the students can be the ones that are like, hold on, it takes a long time. Hold on, it's hard to find the words. And so students are also waiting eagerly, that eager anticipation that can build excitement for the AAC user and, you know, limit their own concerns about how long it might take or giving up, because you have anticipation from everyone who's like, we know it's in there.
Yeah.
And that practice that teachers have had and that students have had, that is real experience about how, you know, even, you know, I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes around like, well, if a student is not speaking and then we hand them a device, if they have something to say, they'll just start talking. And I think I have been using speech generating devices for a number of years, and I'm still needing to learn pathways to messages that I don't yet know.
Right.
And so I think my own ability to model that for my colleagues
Yeah.
has been really important. And I do a lot of the same way we use think aloud when we're modeling, like
Mhm.
reflecting on texts with students, like, oh, I hear that. And so then I can, as I'm looking at a device and trying to help a student navigate to a message, and I'm like, oh, I think that might be in things,
Mhm.
holiday things, the next page. Let's open that one. Do you see what you're looking for? Okay,
Mhm.
something different. And so they're hearing how long it takes to build. So even if you're not looking at the device,
Mhm.
everybody can get sort of that input that the message is slowly being built and it is coming.
Mhm.
So those are some things that we use. I do a lot of modeling of it myself. My staff's pretty good, and having those humbling experiences for everyone where you're just like, wow, this is harder than I thought, or look at them go. But then I think the ultimate reward is when you hear a student make their message. A lot of the communication that we model with students and are providing instruction on is outside of just requesting. We know all of my third, fourth, and fifth graders have so much to ask. Where is that? Or who is that? Or comment on. I had a student who was a fifth grader last year. He took his speech generating device down to the cafeteria. He's with his fifth grade buddies. They're sitting at the table, and he had the yummy lunch his mommy made him, and which is what I like to call the old cold lunch. And the other students were eating pizza on Friday, and they were talking, or, everyone was talking about pizza. And the boys were just like, oh, I love pizza. Friday is my favorite day. And sure enough, my our student, flipped right open his device and he said, I like pizza, commented in the conversation. And it's just that moment where
Mhm.
then everyone in the cafeteria who heard it was like, absolutely, like
Mhm.
full of things to say, needs to have. And then, those fifth grade boys are then the ones who say, hey, where's his device? Hey, where are his words? Because they've heard him talk and they
Mhm.
know
Love it.
he can't talk. So it's like
Mhm.
you have to get those repetitions in and it takes time.
Yeah.
Um, but the students, I think the students can become the peers are
Yeah.
really so important to everything we do because um, it's easy for me to think, oh, I've got everything covered, I've got everything we need. And peers, fourth and fifth graders won't let anything slide. And they're like, oh no, he's going to need this, this, and this. Go
Yeah.
make sure, get him back there and get what he needs and then come back.
Yeah, it's extra special when you get to tell the teacher what they're missing, right?
All right.
Yes, yes, it
So,
is
Amy,
so extra special.
you're obviously a believer in the presuming the competence and the potential for learning. So, where did you get that from? Is there a particular student in the beginning of your career? And I know we always hear there's so many, right? But
Oh
there's
yeah.
usually one or two that were like, oh, when you realize, oh, they are in there, or oh, this voice is this system or this AAC is absolutely critical, and I will fight till the end of my career for this. So where's somebody? Is there any
What are these
student that
moments?
pops to mind?
There are. So I went to, I've been doing this 17 years and I became a special ed teacher right out of college. And I I was appropriately trained to be a special education teacher, and I did not have all the tools I needed yet to be able to serve
Sure.
the range of diverse learning needs that I was about to encounter. And so that has taken me a while to build. And I will tell everyone who's listening that is a special education teacher, the longer you're in, the more you'll learn and the smoother it does get easier. My belt is relatively full now, which is great, and I learn more all the time, which I love. But coming out of college, I was trained very specifically on how to write a student evaluation, and I had a student who I was doing. I don't remember what grade they were in. but it was a third or a fourth grade student, and I remember the family, and I knew the student really well. I had a strong relationship with the student, and I'd worked really hard to develop communication pathways for them to be able to show me what they know, what their interests were, what their skills were, what their passions, what did they want to talk about, and how could I, and I took that seriously. I'm like, oh, if you love, SpongeBob, well, then we will read and write about SpongeBob and you will produce more reading and writing because, boy, is this motivating to you. So, spending this time in relationship and in instruction, I felt like I knew really a lot about all the amazing things that I highly valued about this student's potential and his capacity. But as a trained new special education teacher, I had been taught some very specific ways to write about a student's skills, and one of them was doing an academic assessment, which is important. I don't want to dismiss anything about the
Sure.
evaluation process. Every component of the evaluation process is important, and given a Woodcock Johnson or but whatever I had given him 17 years ago that I thought was going to be an appropriate and accurate measure of his skills, um, when I saw the scores reflected, um, I was gutted. And it gave me a few things. I was like, this student is more than the numbers on the page. Like, this is
Mhm.
emotional to me because this drives everything I do now. I'm
Yes.
like,
Yes.
this student is more than these numbers. Like, I don't think these numbers at all capture. And
Hmm.
I would never want these to be the first thing anyone read about him or
Hmm.
saw about him or thought about him, because that might make people have inherent bias about what he is capable of, or the sorts of work that he should have at school, or the
Absolutely.
sorts of opportunities that he should participate in. And I just remember thinking, I can't be part of a discourse that would limit his future. And
Yeah.
so at that point, I became very passionate about writing IEPs that are and evaluations that do provide appropriate evaluation score reports in my, like, this is me being crossing my T's and dotting my I's, telling folks do your evaluations.
Right.
But
But there's more to it.
there's
Yeah.
more to it. Providing the context and then that rich narrative about who that student is. And
Mhm.
it has evolved over time. I've tried different things. I know a few years ago I started including, you get the general education teachers input, but then I started including, hey, general education peers input in IEPs. Like, what is something you would want other students to know about this kid? This is student voice,
Wow.
super important to me. Um, and and making sure that this full picture, and I want parents to walk away with an IEP and be like, this is an important chapter in my child's life. It tells a lot about what they're capable of. I love getting into an IEP meeting and being able to tell a parent, like, have you do this? Or
Mhm.
they loved this. Take them out in public and try it. They went, they did. So these
Cool.
experiences are the important pieces of the IEP. And so I think about that early student and that early evaluation as a pivotal moment for
Mhm.
me thinking, this isn't enough. I know what they told me to write, and
Mhm.
that's not going to cut it.
Yeah. I
I
love
love it.
that.
You're so passionate about this. That really shines through.
And people, parents hate, for the most part, most parents hate the IEP meeting, and it often
Not
highlights
my
like,
IEP meetings.
I
I
hear
mean, I
that.
shouldn't say that.
I'm excited about that. But because I feel like it highlights the deficits, right? Or the areas or
Yes.
the concerns or the areas of need or however we want to word it. We're not tricking anybody here, right? But
Yeah.
it also is like they don't see my kid. It's that they all they see is what they can't do, and that's why. And so it's like I love that idea of having a peer report in there and student voice in that. Like, this is what his friends have learned about this non-speaking person, and so this is what we know about him. And then when families know that you see their child, not their deficit, but their child, They trust you. And these are not families that are suing school districts over anything because relationships have been built, really,
Right.
relationships have been
Well,
built.
and I think that they're not suing school districts because they have a relationship,
Mhm.
because they know that
The trust.
if they have a question, like they know the person who knows their child will probably also have that question. Like
Yes.
it becomes that team experience.
Well,
And I
they,
think for me, that is like throughout all aspects of my career, working with other people in community has been really the most important um I don't like the most important thing I can do to serve students.
yeah, it establishes
Hmm.
trust and respect, and so much can be built off of those two things.
Yep.
I have so many questions for you that we weren't even prepared to ask you, but it's just so exciting to have you on. I was thinking about your work in the ITPN or coaching others on inclusion or just coaching within your district. I'm sure you do that, or coaching with your paraeducators.
All of
Um,
this, yes.
let's talk about what's some great things that have happened, but also like what are some of the hardest things that you come across? What are some of those barriers that you see? Um,
Oh,
like when you talk about inclusion or you talk about using AAC with students, what are some things that just often happen or come up?
yeah. I think um I tend towards, and you'll be shocked to hear this, I tend towards appreciative inquiry. So thinking about what are the things that are going well,
Hmm.
just in all aspects. So it's, and that I think, like advice for any teaming work, sometimes it's really great to start with that appreciative inquiry. Like
Yes.
when I'm working with my staff, I actually
Hmm.
had an experience where I had a student who is emergent AAC user, and we were experiencing um, he was having a lot of challenges. Like he was stemming on it, which happens. Like it's a new thing. It makes a great noise. You get some comfortable words in there,
Yeah.
and we're trying to work through what are with the SLP, as a team and a room of paraeducators, how are we going to help him utilize this as a communication tool? And then also, what does it mean in his life as a comfort thing? Like,
Mhm.
and we all, my staff's so reflective whenever we talk about this, they're like, I sing to myself all the time. I'm sure it's the same thing. I'm like, I love you for saying that.
Hmm.
Um, but uh but rather than sitting down at a table with my paraeducators and they know that I'm going to do this to them every time and saying, all right, everyone, tell me what's not working well with this device. And every one of them, and then the snowball happens, and they're like, we
Hmm.
were in math and it didn't go well. We were in the cafeteria and it didn't go well. And then it becomes a pile on, and everyone's just like, yeah, that I remember that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But so I had this I am retelling the moment of I said, all right, so has anyone seen any success yet? Like what has worked? Anybody seen
Hmm.
anything? And they're like, and I knew my ladies, and all of us can do that. Like, if the question is what worked and you're
Hmm.
interested in participating in the conversation, you're going to comb through your memories. And it
Yeah.
sure enough, that conversation for around what was happening with this device actually became very positive. And people like, well,
Hmm.
he is carrying it between all his classes. And everyone was like, amen. He is carrying his device. I'm like, and like, so he has some ownership. And I'm like, yes, he does. Look at him go. And they're like, and he's to navigate to his STEM words. And we're like, that's navigating pages. Look at him go. He finds them every time. And so this, but this conversation, I mean, like setting the tone through this
Hmm.
appreciation,
Mhm.
and it's a balance. Like in a world where sometimes, um, it can, like, I don't want to gaslight anyone. I don't want to be like, things are better than you think they are, because
Right.
it is super hard. So for
Right.
me, it
Hmm.
is always that balance, starting those conversations from that place of appreciation, because educators are prone to a negativity bias. As educators, we it's you're working in the world, and some of the things, especially early career educators, I find this, something might not go well. And so it can be really easy to be hard on yourself and be like, and take it personally and internalize it and think, what didn't I do? What can I do? It can get worse. It can be, what do people think of me? What do parents think of me? What does the principal think of me? Which can cause a person to actually react differently. So as I'm working with my colleagues and I'm working with my staff or working in mentoring positions, oftentimes I have to be very aware of the negativity bias we possess, especially for our own interactions, and use a lot of reflection on, okay, something didn't go well. And that doesn't mean you're a bad educator. It doesn't mean you're a bad parent. The fact that you noticed it is fabulous. That didn't go the way you wanted. And you have the opportunity now to change course. So being aware of how our own negativity about the challenges we experience in the day can be one of the most limiting factors I find when I'm working with people. And the first thing we have to do is work through you are enough. And this is a very challenging position for everyone, for families, for paraeducators, for principals, for teachers. And we need to just really sort through what are the specific challenges and how can we address them. And usually that starts with what's going well. Like if you can find what's working and then build on that, sometimes that can get the ball rolling. So,
Oh, okay. Well, so let me rephrase. You just taught me. So what is going well in the area of training for inclusion in your experiences right now?
I'm so horrible. But I kind of also answered your question. What is going well is
You
looking
did.
at the things that are going well. It works for
Yeah.
our kids too. What is going
Yeah.
well in IEPs? Looking at the things that are going well. Those are their skills, and we know they have a take skill set, but we're gonna address everything. I think the things that are going well are real student and family experiences. So within the Washington Education Association trainings that we're doing, within our training group, our cadre, we have a family and caregiver group who provides generously, uses their own examples, reaches out to other families and caregivers to find student examples within our state to provide videos or anecdotes or testimonies, photos, whatever, around the practical application of the skills that we're teaching about. So when I'm talking about using artificial intelligence to help students with intellectual and developmental disabilities write essays in the general education classroom, having my friend Danae make a video of her son doing exactly that seals the deal. Like I can show you me doing it. I can talk to you about it. But when I get the video that Danae has shared, that's it. Like
Yes.
we've seen it.
Yes.
And so I think the only way then to have these examples is to trial these new high leverage practices. Like we need to be using the evidence-based practices and with fidelity, and that creates the examples. And I think that, and then be able to share broadly. And again, that gets to that collaboration piece. So much of the work that I see happening in special education is siloed. Special education teachers tend to be siloed. Something that's kept me in the game forever is not being being out of my classroom with other people in the school is good for my students. Being out in the school with other people, like my community is their community, and that is great for us. But I see that in even like professional development worlds, where as each group is working on their own to create and do, then we replicate things. We burn ourselves out recreating the wheel. We don't necessarily have all the examples or the specific information that other information holders might have. Like I don't have the perspectives of a family or caregiver. I have the perspectives of a teacher. And so I think the Inclusionary Practice Technical Network does exactly that. It brings together the players. And it says, let's not do this in a bunch of silos. Let's see what happens when we communicate with each other to make this stronger and share what we already have to build it faster. Otherwise, as people move out or move on, we lose that historical knowledge. We start rebuilding within our systems over and over and over. And our families and students can't afford rebuild time.
Right, for sure.
And we're
I
definitely going to we'll link the trainings that you guys have on our podcast because those are invaluable for those listeners. Yeah.
And I
but
will
I
plug, we have some very good um what is our new one? Innovations in Technology is the course we're teaching right now, and it does have a portion of AI as assistive technology, which is sort of a separate idea from just AI and education in general. Like, how do you use it as an AT tool? And then potentially, how might you integrate that into your accommodations on your IEP or your 504 plan so that your student has access? So anyone who's
I have a
listening is like,
question though, Amy, on that. So
yeah,
I specialize with working with children with significant physical disabilities. So they're often accessing the communication device or switches or eye gaze, right? They're in their wheelchair bound. So two things that actually three things. One is for sure when I do continuing ed, there's a thought in the audience of, well, my kids are more physically disabled than yours. So for sure I have to show video because then when they see how the physical limitations of the children I'm talking about, then they go, okay, it never lands until they see real kids doing real things. So I totally agree with that. I also agree with the silo is isolating and that creates burnout very, very quickly. And so working on helping teams in continuing education be teams and not just stay in their silos is critical. But I have a question because I have kids with alternative access, which means that it's very, very challenging to complete general education writing assignments. And the pushback from using AI is significant around that. Well, they didn't grammatically write that. They
right.
didn't come up with those ideas. They didn't. If we let everyone use AI, then no one has to come up with their own thoughts. If we let them do it, we have to let everyone do it. Like, where are we at with allowing these children that have, I mean, they can provide some ideas, but not and they don't necessarily can't modify like a modified assignment is one paragraph. That's still a long assignment for someone who's switch access
Yes.
on a device. So it's like, what are appropriate accommodations when it comes to AI, in your opinion?
Well, okay, I'm going to go with my initial. The IEP team gets to make that consideration, and I think that is really important that we're deferring to teams. And I think it's hard for teams to make decisions because we don't have a lot of knowledge yet or like
Right.
decisions as a community about what that's going to be. And what you're describing, really, it's an equity issue, I think, in my mind, and an access issue when we think about an individualized plan for a student who's trying to use switch access to make decisions to be able to craft a paragraph. The I think a team would have to be very clear about understanding like what is the learning standard, or what is the goal of this activity?
Mhm.
Is the goal that they're going to be able to um, to generate a paragraph, and then the tools that they would need to be able to do that is the AI. And we know that the AI is necessary because it allowed, like, you could train the AI to ask yes or no, like, oh, I'm trying to think of the prompt for this. I'm doing two things at once. I'm like writing the AI prompt in my head to give an example on your podcast, which is terrible. And I'm also trying to think about writing that accommodation for that student. But
Yes,
if the question is just, is it appropriate?
both of
I would say
those.
absolutely it's appropriate. And I think it's a very slippery slope when we have educators who are saying, if I let one person do it, then I have to let everyone do it. Absolutely. If I have one person write a paragraph, then I have to have everyone write a paragraph. Okay, if that's the standard, then we know this student is able to generate paragraphs in one way, and that's fabulous. And this student might use voice to text, which is another accommodation. And this student might use pictures or graphics. And this student has this exciting new thing that's artificial intelligence. And it's something that the whole world will have access to eventually and might be useful in them showing us that they can write. So I think about how You know, there are certain assistive technologies that have been around for longer, and the law, and they're very like broadly accepted. So I think
Right,
about like nobody questions a wheelchair, nobody questions
right,
glasses, nobody questions a pencil grip. Those have we've waited our 200 years and now we accept them. But then
right,
I think about we don't have time right now
right.
potentially to wait 200 years for everyone to get comfortable with AI as an assistive technology tool. We need to start having conversations around if this is the tool that the IEP team is deciding might be beneficial for them, then how do we implement it in a way that is effective for the student, honors their skills, interests, and capacities and abilities, and aligns with the learning standards that we've set as a collaborative team with the general education teacher and the special education teacher. So it's it's I am a proponent of having broader conversations with
Hmm.
general education classrooms around like what can artificial intelligence do, and really having them understand the capacity, because and then have conversations about what is cheating and what is not, and
Hmm.
then letting students start to make those decisions for themselves, so you're not just dictating. In our classroom we write a certain way because that is writing, but maybe having more inclusive conversations around, in our classroom we understand that artificial intelligence is one way that some people might write passages, but that isn't my authentic voice, and that's, you know, that isn't what I'm sharing right now, but it can be helpful to other students. And so
Hmm.
when they use it, you know,
Yes.
it's a complicated situation. I don't know if I added anything to your perspective, but just knowing that
Yeah.
it it's probably got to be worked out in the broader community,
And so
Hmm.
there's
and it's got to be just we really need to make sure we're not stigmatizing tools that could be helpful
Right.
to students furthest from social justice.
Because this isn't the first time that question has happened, right? Is it cheating? We talked about that with listen to audiobook. Does that mean that they're cheating because they're listening? Using
right,
speech to text? Same thing.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is stigmatizing. I think about my husband who listens to a lot of audiobooks. He drives a truck, and I'll say, he'll come home and I'll be like, "What did you read today?" And he has a very hard time saying it. You know, he grew up at a time where reading meant eyes moving across a page in a
Right.
certain way. And he'll be like, well, I listened to, and I'm like, I it has a special education teacher who has students who utilize audiobooks as an accommodation. I'm
Yeah.
like, he and I could go rounds over that. And he's one of the most well-read people I know. And who would argue with him? Right?
Right.
Like, to me, I'm like, you could sit in a library with anyone who's reading with their eyeballs and have a conversation about any or all of those books.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping the conversation wouldn't just be whether you read them with your eyes or your ears, right?
So what is some of your advice that you would give people that wanting to move the field forward, and you may be using some guiding principles that change that are solid regardless of the advancements in technology. Like it kind of goes together.
Yeah. Um, I and I feel like I've covered a couple of these things, but you
Yeah.
let me know, what are the guiding principles in special education, the field of special education, that should be steadfast. And the things that I'd thought about were individualization
Mhm.
is really important. And I think that gets back to that relationship with the student and the family and the team, knowing um, the specifics of what is going to be appropriate for that child.
Mhm.
I think if we get into situations where we start to make blanket statements like, for all students, we do this, or for kids in this classroom, we do that.
Yeah.
Everyone who's, doing this gets that. And I think that's challenging. I hear it can feel like an appropriate fix to make sure everybody gets a little bit of everything.
Right.
But when you lose that individualization, um, I just think what has happened then to the planning for that student, like special education is that. I also believe in the team approach, and I think this has come across in some of my other answers.
Mhm.
And that team needs to include the family or caretakers, anyone who's um, got hands and eyes on a student, it's I've learned so much from families, and it starts with, and oftentimes for that to happen, I have to have that relationship, that trust. And sometimes that starts, I think that has to start with me. Like, I have to make sure that I'm showing up authentically and vulnerably with families so that, so that they can show up in those ways with me if they're comfortable, because I think special education or public education is challenging to navigate. It's high stakes in
Mm-hmm.
all aspects. Like, this is important. And so making sure that all team members are showing up and able to lean on each other for support it's important for me to stay in the game. And I think it's great for families. And I think it's a pillar of special education that makes it unique. And if you do it right, successful for kids. And then I think also, um, without having, um, with having high expectations, I think it's important to start planning with the end in mind. That's something else I think is really important for special education, is knowing what we want to do and being super intentional about making sure that everything we're doing is moving us in that direction. That our time is super valuable at school. We only have a limited amount.
Mm-hmm.
And so making sure that when the team gets together and the family says, you know what, it's so important to me that when they graduate that they can do this, and this. And we can as a team start to think about, well, if they're going to do these things, what skills do we need to know they need now that we're
Mm-hmm.
building towards?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that even in little pieces, I think about like students who in my classroom are still working. Most of the students I serve are still working on toilet training, and working with that goal in mind, and doing the task analysis. All right, if they're going to be independent in the bathroom, what do they got to be able to do? Think
Mm-hmm.
about the end goal and work it back, because I can it sometimes when we're working in these situations, where the incremental growth is so, it can feel, um, like it is sometimes just little increments at a time. It can be
Sure.
easy to
Inch stones,
lose
not milestones. Uh-huh.
inch stones, not milestones. So easy to lose sight of the goal.
Yes.
So I am prone to rabbit holes, in case you haven't noticed that. I already mentioned that. Like, so we have to stay focused. So we
Yeah.
have to set these great goals for our students
And
and make sure we program for them, and then stay committed and check ourselves along the way,
Mhm.
which is that like data collection along the way.
Sure.
Um, and if we're not moving the way we want to move, we need to check. Is the intervention correct?
Yeah.
Is is the goal correct? Is the plan correct? And so making sure that we're not just living in the moment, that we're
Yeah.
planning,
Yeah.
for those lofty, fabulous goals that we know that our students can achieve.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I love that you have a plan with those high expectations. And it's, you're not just giving a worksheet to give a worksheet. It's like, what is your goal in this situation? And I'm sure you're not even doing that with worksheets, but that there's a reason you're taking a minute out of this person's day, which is
Yeah.
very small, right? They have so many things going on that in their day, that if you're using it, it's for a reason, and that the students know why. They have that cognitive clarity we've been learning about, that
Mm-hmm.
they know why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I think I love that we're not just handing a kid a worksheet, and this is for all students,
Right.
right? That
Right.
we're so intentional, um, about those learning experiences, because not only, like, I talk to my staff a lot about this. Um, we are teaching the discrete skills that we're teaching. Oh, you're teaching I have a para who supports in math, and I'm like, okay, you're teaching math. You're a math teacher. But you're also someone who's teaching children the way they feel about math, their competency in math, the
Mm-hmm.
way math exists in this world. And so that our experiences in schools, whether we like to think about it or not, are helping shape our students' identities, like what they believe of themselves and others.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even, being in a general education classroom, and, um, the ways we modify or change work is being observed by the student and other students. And so just being aware of all of that, it's a huge lift. But when you get it right, when you're aiming for making sure like this kid not only needs to do math, but they need to know they are capable of doing math. And when they show up to do math with other kids, they participate along with them, and that their skills or their contributions to the class learning are valuable. They belong. Though that I'm constantly with my staff. I'm like, the most important lesson here is what they learn about themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well,
Love it. We can make a poster.
because mindset is
Gorgeous.
so powerful, right? The mindset of the
It-
student, the mindset of the adults around them, the mindset of the peers. That's what
Yep.
I feel like Sarah and I are always saying too, is like, it doesn't matter what we say. We have to shift the mindset. Once you shift the mindset, they see everything, without being
Yeah.
taught. So yeah, there's a lot
Yep.
to that.
And I think about that with my staff too. They are out in the school and they are amazing. I am very lucky to have very veteran staff who've stayed with me for a while. And I think a lot of that is just that relationship we have, um, and the rapport, the professional expectations we have of each other. Like they want me to get something to them and they're going to deliver for kids too as educators. But I think that the mindset that we're sometimes disrupting in schools is folks who are like, oh, Mrs. Campbell, I just couldn't do what you do. I don't know. Like it's so like this imagining that I'm doing something super complicated. And I know sometimes I probably describe it and it sounds that way. And I'm like, I am the thing I think, um, like I'll bring it back to being teacher of the year, receiving that award and standing on stage with social studies teachers and math teachers and science teachers and reading teachers and just stand and realizing I am just not just I am a teacher and you are all teachers and we all have this capacity to serve all of our students, and unfortunately our system has not equipped all teachers to serve students with um, certain specific needs. And so there's this opportunity for us to be able to provide information and growth and access, because all of my colleagues, and I think all teachers, want to be able to serve all students.
For
They
sure.
do. They
Yes.
want to serve them all. And so how do we make sure that our system reinforces we all have this capacity to be able to make changes, offer these opportunities that reinforce belonging, open up our doors and imagine alongside a special education teacher, where is the starting point for inclusion in this space at this
Mhm.
time? What
Mhm.
are we doing? What does this student we share love? And where are we going to connect them at the start, and
Yes.
then build from there as we both build relationship, as we both build these experiences, as those other students realize how to include and how they're part of it,
Right.
and then they're like, bring him back, we don't want him to miss science.
Yeah.
So like it's it is it is just this, I don't even know what the initial question was, but it is an iterative process of all of us changing our identities.
Yes. Yes.
Me understanding I am a teacher and I'm out teaching with my colleagues, and everyone else realizing they're that serving students with diverse learning needs is something we can all have a hand on in a different way. Like we each bring something super special to that game.
Yeah, and I love the
Well,
way you're
you,
describing it, because it's like it's organic and it's all players, and you're basically saying if you start the snowball, it will gather more snow on the way to its destination, right? And it starts to take on its own life of its own. And I love that, love that. We could
yeah, Amy.
continue to talk forever, I think.
Yes.
I love it. I love what I do, but it is all those people I work with who make it
Yes,
great,
Hmm.
and the students and the families. It is pretty special work.
it
So
is.
I always hope to get the snowball rolling in other schools
Yeah.
because, um,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, we're glad you're in the position that you are in, that you are
Yes.
it, doing the work with your students, which I think is great because at the end of the day, you have your students, you're working, you're getting experiences, but that you're able to share those experiences with others, and be so excited about it. We're excited just talking to you. So I know that that must be pretty special for the people who are learning from you.
Yes.
As we wrap up, you've talked a lot about your passion, how you work with other people, inclusion and including families, including peers, and all the things that you're doing right now, in addition to teaching. But is there anything else you wanted to share with us that people might not know, or anything on the horizon?
Well, I think the exciting thing is that it's still exciting. The
Yes.
exciting thing for me is that um, that I love to get up and come and see my kids. I love my colleagues, and I love that I'm still learning so much. So even like as I'm thinking about the question you ask about AI in classrooms, that's something that's been on my mind a ton, and I don't have the answers. I don't have all the ways that it's going to help students. And I think every day I learn a little bit more about artificial intelligence, probably not as much about it as is developing within that same amount of time, which is a little startling, but reality. And so I'm just excited that there is so much opportunity. Still, there are innovations happening all the time in technology, and they're happening faster than they ever have before. And that just means if we can get teams stable and organized, that we can really make change for students all across Washington. And I think that getting people information is so important. I love that you all are connecting more community with this message. Yes. And I think it's important that that as educators we are also learners. So that's what's great and new, is that I'm still learning. And right now it's about AI. I'll come back with more information on that.
I hope you do.
Yes.
But I loved being here today and
thank you
getting
so
to
much.
talk with you.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. It's been a fun conversation.
Yes, it has been. Thank you so much for your time, Amy.
The contents of this podcast were developed under contract with the Washington Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, U.S. Department of Education, and administered by Central Washington University. However, those contents did not necessarily represent the policy of the OSPI and CWU, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal and state government.